Don't say anything I'll regret. I'm live. Okay. All right. Thank you guys so much for coming. My name is Amy Touchette. I'm a fine art photographer. I am based in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, and I specialize in street portraits. I've spent the last over 20 years making candid and posed portraits on the street. And one of the things that I came to realize is that photographing on the street is the art of listening, not just with your ears and your eyes, but with every cell of your body, right? That's how we let intuition in. And then it's basically about cultivating some emotional intelligence so that you react and respond appropriately with the people that you encounter. So because photography is created in such uncontrolled settings, it's arguably the most difficult kind of photography, in my opinion. You really have to think on your feet and be super present, and even though that's challenging, that's also why it's super worthwhile. So I always regard street photography as an antidepressant, and one of the reasons why is because it requires you to get out of your own head to make street portraits. And it teaches you to go with the flow, to embrace change, to regularly confront your fears, and to engage with people in healthy and honest ways. And that's why, again, I'm such an advocate of it, because these are skills that we can easily transfer to real life, not just photographing on the street. This is one of my favorite quotes by one of my top 3 photographers. The condition of photographing is maybe the condition of being on the brink of conversion to anything. Diane Arbus said this, and one of the reasons it's my favorite is because it talks about photography as a state of mind, a condition, versus an action, as it's so often referred to and misunderstood as, in my opinion. So when we walk out on the street, we never know what we're going to encounter. And that's also what this quote is getting at, being on the brink of conversion to anything all the time. Joel Meyerowitz talked about it as like waves that keep crashing over you. So chances are, if you love street photography, that's probably what you like about it so much. The fact that it's always so fresh, the fact that it's always turning into something new. For example, you know, a dog who has a flag in his mouth. Not something you would expect, right? But one of those gifts on the street. So if the street is an unpredictable slice of everyone and everything all the time, how do you gain control of it? I like to use these metaphors, like a painter adds linseed oil to oil paint to make it move around the canvas more easily. A sculptor adds water to clay to make it more malleable. And now I'll ask you guys, what does a photographer add to make photographing easier for them? You can't answer. Former student already knows the answer to this. Anyone? Any ideas of what a photographer would add to make photographing on the street easier for them? Yes, back there, sorry.
Making the camera just an extension of your eye.
Sort of. You?
I was going to say conversations.
Yes, also sort of. Like, basically you add yourself. As Eve Arnold famously said, it's you that's the instrument, not the camera. And I think this picture by Shirley Baker shows that, you know, it's about the fact that she infused herself into this situation is what made this photograph. So as this Diane Arbus photograph suggests, one of my favorite, this has been on my screensaver ever since I've had a cell phone. Like, how many times does that mean I've looked at it? Like 15 years of, you know, still not sick of it. But I feel like what this photograph imparts is that you are a salesperson of your own passion. You want to create an atmosphere where street photography is easier for you, so you're also a customer service agent. You want the people around you to accept you, to accept your presence, to accept photography. And the way you do that is by adding yourself. It's a very, very, very personal genre of street photography. So your primary medium actually isn't photography, it's the relationships you form with the people, things, and places you encounter as you walk around in public spaces, even if you're interacting wordlessly with them, which I assume Richard Sandler was doing in this marvelous photograph. For example, in this Danny Lyons image, I feel like his involvement with his subjects was so much a part of what created this wonderful image. So the first thing you want to do is put in place habits that allow you to infuse yourself on the street, okay? If you're going to be your own linseed oil, your own water, then you have to get in there and actually let some of yourself come through. And, you know, doing so won't give you complete control. Obviously, there are other people in the equation, but at least it gets the interaction started off on your terms, or you know, you might have some say in how things go. So when your subject is everyday people, the main thing to keep in mind, in my opinion, is the responsibility you have toward them. It's kind of a strange thing that we use reality as our canvas, but it's also kind of the most beautiful, worthwhile thing, in my opinion. So you want to be really keen on other people's perspective when you're out there. It has to be your main priority. So, you know, by treating people with respect, it's not only doing the right thing, but you're much more likely to get the image that you're after also. So what I've tried to do in this talk is break down in really elemental ways how I've navigated on the street, in hopes that you will find a way that's intuitive for you to do the same. So the first thing that I do is remove obstructions and distractions. So by obstructions, I mean not wearing ear pods. You know, I teach at the International Center of Photography, and I can always tell when someone's made a picture with their ear pods on. And I understand it's super fun to bop around the city, you know, I get it. But in my opinion, it's impossible to listen with every cell of your body when you've turned off your ears, right? It's like when you walk behind someone on the subway or in the street and you know they can't sense you because they have their pods in. Also, not wearing sunglasses. So not only are you removing obstructions to sense other people, but you want to be able, for them to be able to see your eyes, right? So you're removing obstructions from other people's perspective as you're photographing. Also, wearing comfortable shoes, not carrying a heavy bag, you know, putting your iPhone off if possible, or something like that, so that you're removing all the distractions that can keep you from losing your focus. Other things that are sort of fundamental when you're starting out is just like making observations about your community. So, you know, you want to think about where you are, and there's countless observations you can make about any given people, and these are just a few. What types of people inhabit it? Is it a mix of ethnicities or mostly one in particular? What is the social and economic situation in the area? Is it a well-populated setting or a more remote one? I mean, these are super fundamental. Do people interact a lot with one another, or do they keep to themselves? What is the mood of the people in the place? What time of day is it, and what might people be up to as a result? Are they on their way to the work? Are they dropping kids off at school? Are they enjoying free time? These are all things that just help you formulate, again, a relationship with where you are. But you also want to consider yourself, right? So it also involves some self-reflection as much as reflecting on your community. You want to consider how you are in the mix among this community that you're photographing. Are you vastly different? Are you similar? Are you somewhere in between? Who are you to your subjects? But, you know, we see things not as they are, but as we are. So a lot of observations that you make about a setting and a person are based on your own associations and your own entirely subjective point of view. So you want to remember that, you know, this is just you trying to warm up, basically. It's like providing a ground zero for you to launch from. So you always want to be open to listening and learning and adapting accordingly, continuously as you're photographing on the street, and you continue to amass observations about where you are and who you're among. Think twice before photographing where it's not allowed. Like, once I see the sign, no photography allowed, I immediately want to make a picture. So I get that impulse. But, you know, you just want to think twice about it. There's obviously some really righteous reasons for, you know, jumping the fence, so-called. And I'm always really glad that there's a lot of photographers that are out there that are showing us things that we really need to see. For me, on the street, I like to just concentrate on the places that I have easy access to, just because there's so much so much beauty going on just in places that are easy to access. Why take on some problem that I don't need to take on when I have other problems to solve? But sometimes, the risks are worth it. Like I made this picture in the ladies' room of the McCarran Park pool, and this was, they don't allow you to take cameras out into the pool area. And I really loved this. I made this photograph in 2012. I really loved, urban pool life, but I couldn't bring my camera out there. So I would go out to the pool and I would ask someone to come into the ladies' room, and you can see my purple lock right here. I had I think at the time I was using a Yashica mat. This is before I got my Rolleiflex. And I would make pictures of them right there. And I did this just like 2 times, like for about an hour each. And I thought I was going to get away with it, even though the staff there are like extremely strict. I didn't really know why I was getting away with it. I thought eventually I would get kicked out, and I did. And it reminded me that getting kicked out is not that big of a deal, right? But if you are photographing where it's not allowed, you just want to think about the consequences. And if you're up for it, sometimes it's super embarrassing to get kicked out. Other times, I don't know, you're strong, you feel secure, you just, are let out by the security agent. Oh well, And then you want to relax and let go. You've done all this thinking, you've done all this formulating. Being on the street is so much about feeling and so little about thinking. And again, this is a way for the intuition to seep in to our process. And I think intuition is something that is so mystical to a lot of people, but it actually can be broken down, and we'll continue to talk about that throughout this talk. So using the mind-body connection, I feel like, is indispensable to street photographers. It's one of the most powerful tools that we have, not just as photographers, but as humans. And yeah, this isn't mystical stuff, right? You look at a piece of cake and your mouth waters. You exercise and you have feelings of euphoria. You have emotional stress and you get an ulcer. So these things they're not as behind the scenes as we think. And so how does the mind-body connection help street photographers? Well, for one, it means we can have some insight into how someone else might feel based on the physical cues that their body gives. All animals are constantly taking in information and sort of registering it on your body. Like your shoulders go up, or you start to smile based on what you're looking at. In every moment, your body holds a tally of what's going on. So if it's possible for you to get an underlying sense of how someone else is doing, then it's also possible for the people that you want to photograph to get an underlying sense of you, whether they know it or not. So, your vibe, your physical appearance, all of those things are factored into how people view us. We are all much more transparent than we think if we really take a moment to notice and look at one another. So when it comes to perceiving others' attitudes and feelings, one study showed that 93% of our perception of another person's emotional state is based on nonverbal cues. Isn't that incredible? 93%. So, and again, this is one way that gut feelings are established about a person. Like, I just had a feeling about her. These are unconscious and conscious observations that feed our intuition. So what else is it made of? Body language, 55%. Tone of voice, 38%. Words, 7%. So it does matter what you say, but it matters a lot more what you're bringing when you show up, your presence. Every single aspect, every detail that you wear everywhere matters, adds up. People notice. So you really want to start interactions mindfully. You really want to get into the state of mind, going back to Deanne Arbus's quote about it being a condition, a state of mind. So this is a place for you to get ready to be in this thing called street photography. So, you're responsible how the exchange starts. Like, if you want to fake it till you make it, that's fine, but you do want to get into that space, or else you're probably going to have a lot of rejections. And this is also just, it affects the pictures you make, it affects the experience you have, the way other people perceive you, and then how well you're able to respond to the interactions that you encounter. So one simplified example is you could be a tall man with a deep voice but have the demeanor of a teddy bear. And it's quite possible that your subjects will look past what many consider, I don't know, intimidating physical attributes and defer to the kindness instead. That stuff comes through. A lot of people ask me, like, you know, can I photograph kids if I'm a man? Or, you know, and I really think, or, you know, if I'm a woman, can I photograph in a poker game? I really think that things like gender are a lot less important than people give them credit. And yes, we have associations with various sexes, but in my mind, you equal your pictures, your mindset equals your pictures. So just establishing where you're coming from there is a major launching point. And this is something that I advocate in life too, at least I advocate it to myself when I have conversations with myself, invoke the law of attraction, like be what you're looking for. So, you know, this is something that helps me get the kind of reaction that I want, so I can make the portraits that I want by deliberately embodying the same emotion while I'm photographing. So, for example, I always want my subjects to feel comfortable and calm and genuine in front of the lens. So that's the state of mind that I cultivate before I go out, so that they'll kind of mirror me. You know, and obviously your subjects are going to bring your own mindset as well, and it might be the opposite of what you're aiming for, but at least it gets things on the path that you have started, because you are the one who initiated this interaction. So this is a big thing, right? There's a lot of, I feel like, talk about fear when you're photographing on the street, and for me, I realized that fear is a tool. It's actually an effect. It's a reaction. So when it arises, why did it arise? And I feel like it's so important to embrace, actually, fear. It's not going to go away. As someone who's been photographing on the street for over 20 years, that sort of fear might morph into more like a word like tension, but it never goes away because every person's unique. Every situation is unique. So there's always a good reason to be afraid or to not confront the tension of photographing someone. So when you feel this feeling, I think in order to make really good use of it, you want to get to the bottom of why, right? I said it's an effect. So like, what was the cause? Usually it's pessimism. It's self-sabotage. It's like the assumption that things won't go well. My grandmother used to call it borrowing trouble. You know, and why do we do something so nonsensical when the bad thing hasn't happened yet? Well, usually it's to create some emotional safety net, right? Like just to put ourselves in the position of already getting rejected or already, losing out or already messing up, whatever, fill in the blank. And, preparing for the worst case scenario wouldn't be so terrible if it didn't cause a chain reaction. Like when you're deciding to embody that thought, then you're actually sabotaging this whole flow of energy that I'm trying to talk about with the mind and your mindset, starting your interaction on a certain path. So yeah, you're basically like getting the interaction on the way to not working out. So it's, very common, but it's a nonsensical form of self-sabotage. Fear can also be a sign of inspiration. Like you really, 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 really care about how it's going to go. And you're afraid. And it's not that you want to set it on a negative path, but you just feel like there's so much at stake or something like that. So this is also great to know, not just because we want to get to the bottom of why so we can react accordingly, but this inspiration, this question of answering why can really help you figure out the relationship that you're forming on the street, and also be really helpful when you're sequencing and selecting images, because it sort of elucidates where the teaming ground is for you. So answering the question why, like if you guys have been studying photography a lot, why am I photographing? It's beyond just one picture. And it's not just that it's beyond one picture, it's like, what kind of relationship do I want to have on the street? And when you're inspired, all of the answers to those questions fall into that category or into that area of research within your own spirit as a human. But fear can also be a sign of danger. So the truth is, street photographers are in public. It can get a little crazy out there. Usually it doesn't. It depends on where you are. But we always have to be thinking about our safety. So sometimes we're out there, you know, quite frankly, you want to make sure that you're not photographing like a drug deal by accident, which can happen because they're just out there, right? Like, I'll talk about later where my parameters are, but you know, that's not something I'm interested in doing on the street, not only for my physical safety, but for other reasons. But because we're talking about physical safety, you know, not a smart thing to do. And sometimes you don't know until it's happening that you're like, well, this is not what I want to be photographing. So that's an important thing to think about. And actually, quite a while ago when I was a little bit on my way as a street photographer, I went to the American South for a month by myself just to confront this fear that I thought I was gonna like get over. I had this notion that I was just gonna like get over it. If I kept photographing all the time, then maybe I wouldn't have to have this painful emotion of fear. Really stupid. It doesn't go away, you know. But I did learn a lot because I did actually get really used to confronting fear, and it did feel amazing, super liberating. Every time I felt it, I just confronted it, and I got really used to reacting in that way. And then one day, I found myself walking in a neighborhood that was full of people who were down and out. There were, you know, dogs scaling the fences, and here I was doing my thing, you know, like an idiot, quite frankly. And eventually, I was I would say like my body told me before my mind, because my mind was so stubborn, it just kind of slowed down, and I realized, what kind of pictures do I imagine getting here? Are they worth it? Because they're probably going to be out of focus like my other pictures. You know, it's just a really like stupid call, but a very easy one for a street photographer to get into when this is your aim, right? Your aim is to infuse yourself somehow. This is an image by Bruce Davidson. His body of work, Subway, was basically built on his fears. So after realizing that the subway was a great equalizer and that everyone rode it, he started photographing people on the subway. But at that time, that was 1980, it could be a very dangerous place, day or night. So to prepare, he went on a crash diet. He got in shape, partially just so he could carry his heavy equipment around for so long and perhaps run if he needs to. And he also carried a small Swiss Army knife and a whistle. Different times, right? But despite his preparations, he was still gripped with fear every time he went down to the subway. He even said that he was afraid of asking, quote unquote, little old ladies for their photograph. And then one day he encountered this guy who was like, take my picture and I'm gonna break your neck. And he's like, whoa, 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 you know, I never take someone's picture without asking them. He also brought, remember those little wedding photo albums that we used to have when we made prints? Well, he used to, you know, carry around his prints so he could show them to people. And that worked on this guy, you know, someone who was so against being photographed. You can get through to them, and something like filling in the blanks by having examples of your own photography really helps. So, and he also said that sometimes he would resist going down to the subway, and when that would happen, he would, quote unquote, let hunger pull him down there like a rat. So he would decide, all right, I'm just going to go to Nathan's in Coney Island and get a hot dog. Like, I'm not going to take any pictures, but like Nathan's, you know, Coney Island was, I don't know, an hour and a half subway ride. And before he knew it, you know, way before he got to Nathan's, he'd be inspired and ready to photograph. So I think it's important to remember that even the most seasoned of photographers have to play little tricks on themselves. I spend a decent amount of my time in front of a computer, so what I say to myself is I don't have to take any pictures, I just need to walk. And I don't even know why I don't want to go out photographing, but like sometimes it happens. It's just because of this tension and you just don't feel like, you know, butting up against it. So that's what I would do. And then within 2 blocks, my heart would start beating, racing, whatever. I'd see someone I want to photograph, and it would be business as usual. So however it works for you to get yourself out there, just do it. Just play a little trick on yourself. At one point, Davidson actually did get mugged. He went to the police and he never found the guy. But in 1985, New York Magazine commissioned him to ride around with New York City police officers who were undercover. And they would basically like put Davidson in an area with all of his expensive equipment and like wait for someone to mug him so they could bust people. So it happened, and actually the guy in the tan, was attempting to mug Bruce Davidson, and the guy in the red is an undercover police officer. So this also, totally off topic, but is, begs the conversation about making sure that photographs are given the proper context. Because when you look at this photograph, the first thing you do is feel sorry for the guy in tan, which I do anyway, even though I know the story. It looks awful. It looks awful to have a gun pointed to your head. But so it was a different reality down there. So talk about fear, So I keep saying it requires a steady confrontation of these fears. And obviously Davidson's fears were part inspiration and part actual danger. So the point is, if you find yourself resisting a certain subject, you want to ask yourself why and then act on it appropriately. So if it's pessimism, stop sabotaging yourself. If it's inspiration, get to work. If it's danger, just get out of there slowly and calmly and get yourself to a safe place. But just understanding the forms that fear takes and being able to analyze why they arise is extremely helpful. But that doesn't mean that they go away or that there's not some blockage there. So what do you do? What do you do to mitigate these feelings of fear? In my opinion, you get physical. Again, going back to the mind-body connection, you want to change your mind, then change your body. Allow it to create new neural pathways. Just do something, play the drums, go on a fair rides, go dancing, anything that makes you give over to the sensorial experiences is just a way of sort of resetting your body, which has an effect on your mind. So how to gain a stranger's trust. I think you need to focus on your outward appearance and presence. And again, these are all because these are signs that you're giving to people around you. And these are surface appearances, but they all add up to, if you want to make photos without asking people, the way you, not only your presence, but actually, let's get down to the nitty gritty. Let's just start with the clothing you wear. So you want to think about the impression that you're making with your clothing. So, I always say, if a person's going to a meeting or to an interview, you think about what you're going to wear, right? You want to make a certain impression, maybe you wear a business suit or something like that. I always think that wearing something that portrays who I honestly am is really helpful versus trying to camouflage myself, because I want people to get to know who I am. I want people to somehow gather that I'm not up to no good, right? And I know that clothing is really surface, but it's a starting point, and people they do notice, right? And they do make judgments based on it. So for me, I like wearing very casual clothes when I go out photographing. I usually wear a skirt and shoes that are high enough where I can photograph with a Rolleiflex since I look down. That's more of a practical thing. But I also use a purse instead of a camera bag. This is just how I go about it. And the reason I do that is because I want people to have regard me with a soft approach and not I have some unyielding agenda. So, but I also know highly successful street photographers who wear the full vest and they got the two cameras out, and so it's to each his own. But this is just something that I've done because I would like to make the interaction be very casual and not there's a bunch at stake. And also because I'm not with a paper or a magazine or, this image isn't going to go straight up, be published somewhere. It's actually, I think, a truthful portrayal of who I am. So also on my trip to the American South, it's another picture from that, I went to Walmart and bought a fake wedding band because I just thought, maybe parents would be more amenable to me photographing their kids, or maybe if someone saw me talking to their partner, they would realize that I don't have those designs, I'm just talking to them. And I was really glad that I did because I had never worn one before and I've never worn one since. And it actually worked. It was really quite helpful. So it might sound disingenuous that I bought this fake ring after all this talk about, trying to be authentic and portray yourself authentically. But the truth was I was in a long-term relationship. I still am. And so for me, I was telling something truthful about who I was, but just with like one little white lie in there, which was that I hadn't walked down the aisle. So more about like delving into this idea of building your relationships with the street, then you want to sort of like analyze your thoughts. All right, okay, I'm deciding to wear this. I'm deciding to do that. I'm wearing this ring. Like, is that okay? Like, where are your limits to what you will and won't portray when you're on the street? And so, some people don't want to lie at all. Some people are fine with that. I guess my point here is to just analyze that because, again, that tells you a lot about like why you're on the street, what you're up to, and getting closer and closer to that question of what kind of photographs you're going to make as a result. Because the intentions that you come with have a major effect on the photographs that you make. And it also like helps you get the most out of your street photography, and again, comes up really helpfully when you're sequencing images, selecting images, trying to find your own personal vision. I also think having an easeful demeanor is really helpful. Just like fire needs air, you want people to feel like they have room to make up their mind. You don't want to bum rush them. You want them to feel that you're not someone who's going to press them for a photograph or just take it if, whatever, under certain circumstances that might be upsetting to them. So a lot of these photographs that I've been showing you, all but, I don't know, maybe one so far, have been candid. Like, I didn't exchange any words with this woman. And I have to assume that there was something in my demeanor that made her more amenable to having me photograph her, or not viewing me as a threat or whatever. So you can convey these aspects of yourself through your comportment, through your words, depending on your preference or what the situation necessitates. When I made this picture, I was in Oaxaca, Mexico. And I don't speak Spanish, and so for me, I didn't have the words. So, but sometimes I think, I don't know, like there being a language barrier actually gets me closer more quickly to the people I want to photograph, because I do have to use my face more, and maybe you put up your camera like, and you talk like this, like with expressions, and I don't know, sometimes words just feel really reductive, so that can be a really beautiful experience. And then one thing I just want to, like, after all this talk of fear and like worst case scenario, I just want to say that, like, often, like, there's so much fear about upsetting people, but it's such a rare occurrence. So I just wanted to, when I get interviewed, everyone's like, so what do you do when people get mad? And I don't even know if we talked about this set the other day, but it was just like, no one says, like, what happens when you make someone's day? Like, no one asked me that in the interview. And it happens way more often. I mean, I'm not saying I go around with my stardust making everyone's day, but it happens way more than upsetting people. So I want to remind you that photographing people, ... can connect you. Some people really enjoy being photographed. Like, you can make someone's day. And probably some of you in here have experienced that, maybe more than one time, and it's really super special. And it's so worthwhile. And it's really that connection that I feel like humanity's suffering from right now, is that lack of connection, right? COVID did not help matters. But I also want to just like go back to the previous image and talk about resting faces. In my experience, like, a lot of people have resting faces that aren't necessarily indicative of them being amenable to being photographed or not. Like this guy, I think he spoke Spanish. We didn't speak at all. I saw him. I'm walking down the street. I make a picture. He sees me. I keep walking. I take another picture, and he's happy. So it's a really beautiful thing, and it just giving up because how someone's face looks, to me, it's just eliminating some possibilities that might be out there for you. So just to summarize, you want to be aware of your presence, right? move slowly, not aggressively or erratically. Like these things on the street, like this is our canvas, right? So we want to like be everywhere. We're all excited. We're making artwork. It's just kind of, it's not the vibe that everyone has out there, right? So again, these are just like my points of view, things that have helped me. You want to smile, but not all the time. Like that would be weird, right? But you definitely want to seem like a friendly person. Be calm and polite, just like you were a guest in someone's home. You know, you want to be nice to people and not be like so aggressive with your intentions that you're sort of like, I don't know, busting your way in. Having a sense of humor. You can get so many pictures by just, you know, lightening the situation. As always, photographing intermittently. I know we get excited about photographing people, and like in our ideal world, we get like right close up to them and photo some more. It's just not really the way it goes. So I try to keep a really light hand when I'm out there photographing. It's a lot like if anyone's photographed weddings here, you know, yes, you would love to be up at the altar the whole time, right? But the fact is there's an event that's taking place in person, and all the people that are watching the event don't want to see the back of the photographer's head in front of the altar, right? So what do? You go up there, you make your pictures, and then you recede. So it's a lot like that on the street. And most importantly, this is my favorite keynote, like little trick. Believe in what you are doing. So long as you carry you're someone who believes in what you are doing, who thinks street photography is valuable and worthwhile, you can convey a sense of trust to many people quite quickly without saying a word. But you have to believe in street photography, and I think that this is an issue for, you know, a lot of people. Like, do you think street photography is important? Do you think it has a role in society? Do you think it has a role in creating our history? I think yes, you know, and I feel like the less we photograph candidly on the street, in the long term, like we're really going to be missing a lot about how we act, what happened in the past, all these things that we don't want to repeat. So this is an image of a picture in my office. One thing that I think is really helpful, like if you believe in street photography, but you don't believe, but you can't embrace that, I advocate for putting up pictures, like tearing them out of magazines and putting them up on your wall, images that mean a lot to you, that you just encounter a lot. So I just use blue tape, you know, the painter's tape, so you don't have to have a fancy cork board or magnetic board or anything like that. I used to always think, oh, when I'm rich, I'm gonna have like this beautiful board, you know, and then I realized I don't need that, you know, plus I'm never gonna be rich. Oh, God. But so using blue tape is really great. You can move things around. It doesn't mar any walls. I have really nice walls. It doesn't do anything to them. And I see these images all the time. So I don't have a problem. I've already like cleared that hurdle with myself that I think street photography is important, obviously, or else I wouldn't be here. But I still sort of walk around with these images front and center as I'm out there. And those sorts of things people pick up on. So, for example, here's another picture on a different wall by Robert Frank from 1955 that was taken in New Orleans. That is a candid historical image that's essential in documenting where we've been. Where would we be without this photograph? I hope we all see this photograph. I hope we all remember it. Like, this happened. Very close to swearing Seth, but I'm not going to. And this is another one made by Susan Meiselas that says so much about neighborhood bonds and friendship. It was made in Little Italy in the 1970s. So thankful for this photograph. Another one, this has been a screensaver on my computer for years and years and years. New York Times put it up a long time ago. It was made in the village. I don't think they said the year, but like the mama cat was bringing the kittens across the road, so the police officer stopped traffic so she could do this. And I just think, wow, what a lovely picture of time gone by. Like, there's so much to say about it, you know? And then there are pictures like this that just like keep us laughing, right? That keep us from taking life too seriously. This is Joel Meyerowitz. I forgot to put his name underneath here. And I believe with every cell of my body that we need these photographs, and that the photographers who made them, you know, show us life and keep us honest, like I said. And I keep that belief front and center as I photograph. So here's the big question. Did you just take my picture? what to do when you're confronted. So obviously there are a number of ways that you can handle this, and it's up to you to make it go well. You have some explaining to do, so you want to sort of have all these thoughts prepared before you go out there. This is how you gain confidence on the street, by having these conversations with yourself, like, what am I going to say when someone asks me, did you just take my picture? Or obviously you can ask first, right? But we're talking about both candid and pose. So if you're going out there making candid images, which I do quite frequently, what are you gonna do? So these are some of the points that I try to get across depending on the situation. First thing I would say is the truth. And the light was so nice. You look so peaceful. Your dog is so cute. Whatever it was that really inspired you to photograph this person, you just say. And so once you walk around with the knowledge that truth is on your side, like, that's also a confidence builder. You don't have to come up with some lie. What was the truth? You just say it, right? And also, like, flattery goes a long way with people, because we're all sort of inherently insecure about our looks, I think. I know I can be from time to time, so just like putting in place like this idea that like you really like something about them is really important. And it's also really effective. And also, sometimes when people ask this question, it's easy to think that they're not cool with it, but a lot of times they're just asking, right? It's not like, did you, and I hope you didn't. It's just like, did you, Also, explaining you're a photographer can legitimize you in some people's eyes. Some people, aren't so impressed by photographers, so it can also go the other way. But just telling someone that you're a photographer, it just sort of, along with that, you have this notion that you're expressing to other people that you've been doing this, that you've thought about this, that you're not some random person on the street making pictures. Also, like spelling out your motivations. I always let people know that I photograph as a way of connecting with people. My photographs are celebrations of people, not to make them look bad or catch them in an unfair moment. Like one of my parameters when I'm out in the street is I don't photograph homeless people. I don't photograph drunk people. I don't photograph people who are picking their nose. I don't photograph any people who are crying. Like anyone who, in your right mind, would rather not be living out whatever they're living out in public. I don't photograph those people, right? So that really helps too, is just when people ask, did you photograph me? The fact is, it's, in my opinion, an innocuous situation, okay? Like maybe two people are having an affair and I don't know it, right? So that's not innocuous. But, just spelling out your motivations help people know that, that you've thought through, that you have a moral code here. And so, yeah, you want to think about what are your motivations? Like, what behavior are you willing to answer to? Again, all this stuff is going to feed into the confidence that you'll have when you're walking around, which allows for you to get pictures and good pictures. And then also like clarifying your reasons for making candid photography. Like oftentimes when people are asked about being or upset about being photographed, it's because they feel like it infringes on their right to privacy, or at the very least they think it's impolite or rude. So if the conversation goes down this path, I explain that like sometimes I do ask people's permission, which is true, and other times I just don't want to disturb that person. So by putting my motivations in terms of them as opposed to explaining my agenda, it makes them feel like I've considered their position, that I'm not out just achieving my own goals and, like I was saying before, like sort of bum rushing around, making reality like my own playground without thinking of other people and their points of view. So, also remember a lot of people don't know about the genre of street photography, so for them it's just super weird that anyone would want to take a picture of a stranger. They just think of them as family albums and things like that. Some people feel that photographing strangers on the street without asking their permission is unlawful. So it's not when you're in a public space, at least not in New York City. So if you are traveling, you do want to find out what the laws are there, because they do differ from country to country. But I'm very New York centric. I do like to photograph in other places, but it's not illegal here. So, I always follow that up by saying, no, it's not. But I don't photograph people who don't want to be photographed. Again, you want them to know that you've thought about the ethics of photographing people. And then bringing business cards or examples of your photography. We were talking about Bruce Davidson doing that earlier. I always bring like postcards, or even my business card has a picture on each side. And that just, it fills in so many blanks. Like, oh, this is the kind of photo that you're gonna take. Sort of impossible for you to impart, you know, but with a picture like that. So that can be really helpful. It can also be nice if you wanna stay in touch with people, or you want people to get in touch with you later, blah, blah, blah. Being sensitive to people's signals. I always say this, it's a lot like, you know, in your personal life when you're having a conversation with someone and you want things to go better, like remove yourself from your own agenda and start really looking at what signs and signals that they're giving off. Like, what do they need to hear? Like, why are they upset? How can you fix this, right? So, you know, just like, I often will restate someone's words so they know I've heard them. You know, like they're saying something to me, I start by saying, I hear what you say, you know, and then continue with whatever else it is that I feel like I should say at that moment. And that can really put the situation in a more positive place once they feel like they've been understood and respected, just like any other relationship. And then keeping your emotions in check. Like at any point with a subject, like again, this is like worst case scenario. I'm sort of like going in tears here, but emotions could be running high. It depends. Like people, you never know who you're encountering. You don't know where they just were, what their history is, any of that stuff. So you just want to let them know you didn't mean to offend them. I always say the fact that I've upset you is the worst case scenario. Not at all what I was going for. I'm trying to make friends out here, you know, and this is not what I wanted, so I apologize, like that kind of thing. And then also, like if they do provoke fear in you and you're feeling like a little intimidated, which is totally natural, just try not to show it because, and again, you're just sort of faking that, even if you are feeling that, because for some people, if they see that, oh, your feathers are getting ruffled, that you actually think you're in the wrong and that they're right, and it's just a way of sort of like validating what they're saying, even though that's not at all how you feel. It's just the emotional reaction you're getting off or you're giving off. So you want to stay like calm and unflustered, and just remember the situation is temporary and it will soon be over. And if you're not up to no good, you really didn't do much wrong. You know, you photographed someone who didn't want to be photographed. There are worse things, you know. And then know when to give up. Like if at any point things get really tough, your tactics don't work, or you feel like it's better to disengage for whatever reason, just like trust your intuition and your previous experience and just let the situation go. You know, if the person will only feel satisfied if you delete their photo, delete the photo. If you work in film and it can't be eradicated that quickly, you know, when you get home, just don't use it. Like be that responsible person. But I will say, I never offer to delete a photograph. Like, I'm not gonna say, would you like me to, I'm so sorry, would you like me to delete it? No, I'll say I'm so sorry, but I'll wait for them to mandate that situation just because, I don't know, I probably wouldn't use it if they didn't, I wouldn't use it if they didn't want me to photograph them, but I don't know, I just don't wanna offer to delete it, right? So, you know, this can hurt like emotionally and psychologically, but I just keep in mind that photography can connect us way more than it can, I don't know, provoke discontent and distrust. So in cases like this, I try to focus on the bigger picture. And then just getting back on the horse. I just think if you do have a weird interaction, like put your camera down, get a coffee, go sit at the park, call a friend, and then go back out and photograph before you end the day. It's just gonna make it harder the next day if you leave your day of photographing on a bad note, so to say. And again, this is not typical. These are just like worst case scenarios, so we can just like get it out there in the open. So how to gain a stranger's trust. There's a way to get in any community if you don't knock too loudly. Again, our friend Bruce Davidson, I don't even know Bruce, but he's my photographic friend. So when he made East 100th Street, he used a 4x5 format camera with a strobe, and he really wanted to be seen like as a professional. He walked around the neighborhood with someone else who was a native, so he could gain members' trust. Now we also talked about him having photographs when he was making Brooklyn Gang. He gave images to these teenagers so they would know what kind of images he's making so that when he was around, they could be confident about what he was up to. Mary Ellen Mark would sometimes spend days walking the streets of the neighborhood without even having a camera around her neck until she felt she had created some relationships with people in the community. And she also photographed like around events versus like right in them. Like this is an example of a parade. Looks like she's right in the midst of it. But she also like walked around the perimeter, and that was a really teeming ground for her. And then obviously, you can see that she was able to make people really comfortable with her. Bruce Gilden has a much more aggressive approach. He jumps in front of people and to isolate them and separate them from the background. You can really see it there. And he says, I get the impression that after this picture was taken, this guy probably looked behind him like, oh, I don't even know what he was photographing. And I have this quote here by Bruce Gilden. As far as invisibility goes, I think people overdo it. When you have a small camera, you become a sneak. The rules of the game change. You can be invisible and work very close, because sometimes I'm so close with people, they don't realize I'm taking their picture, and they look behind them to see who they took a picture of. One of my heroes, Jamel Shabazz, he says he hardly ever takes a picture without asking someone. He says that he finds it very difficult, and that occasionally he will, but there's something really magical about being able to approach strangers and convincing them that you're sincere. And here's another of his, and I just love that he used the term magical, because I think a lot of times when you think you get involved in the picture that the magic is gone, but no, because that's how cool Jamel is. He recognizes that stuff, Deanne Arbus sometimes fumbled with her equipment, acting like a novice, to distract her sitters. So I think she was just, trying to impart that there wasn't a lot at stake here, that she was just some lady who was messing with her camera. And then, she was buying time until the best moment presented itself. This is another Deanne Arbus I've stared at for many, many years. You can really feel her presence in this photo. I feel like when I look at this photo, it may be because I've looked at it too long, but I see Deanne Arbus. I don't really see these women. I mean, I do, but I don't, but I do, but I don't, right? Gary Winogrand, also one of my faves. Here he is on the left. He was a very physical photographer, like lunging, twisting, reacting unhesitatingly to what he saw on the street, and trying to capture that fleeting piece of life, like even while he's smoking a cigarette, as you can see in this photo. He also would push his film so that he would have technical latitude to make pictures really quickly. So he would know what would be in focus, so he wouldn't have to focus every time he brought the camera up to his eye. He would know, all right, I'm going to be in focus from 5 feet to 20 feet. So once you get used to understanding those dimensions, which you can practice at home before you even go out there, you can be super quick, like he was. And then I always love to tell this story. So I went to some of Gary Winogrand event, and Alex Webb was there. Gary Winogrand has passed away for many years now, but Alex Webb, who's a Magnum photographer, said he was out photographing with Gary Winogrand one day, and Gary made a picture, and the woman who he made a picture of said, "Did you just take my picture?" And he said, "What do you mean your picture? It's my picture." So I wouldn't respond that way, but that was him, right? He just really believed in it. Well, I don't even know what you're talking about, lady. Why is it your picture, So, it's just you just gotta find your way and do what feels right. So as for me, I make posed pictures with my Rolleiflex, which is a twin lens reflex film camera, and unposed photographs with my iPhone, which I've been referring to as Candid. But and so this is what I'm doing here in this photo. So it doesn't mean that there isn't some acknowledgement going on with us. I really like eye contact, so I usually am not looking for smiles like this necessarily, but I just thought it was a good picture to sort of illustrate where how I work a little bit. Obviously, he sees me here. And I like people to see me even when I'm working candidly. Again, I really like eye contact. This is my bad habit of photographing while driving. Don't do as the speaker does, do it, as she says. So yeah, I like to wait until they look at me or look my way, and then I just edit for those moments. So sometimes I might start photographing before I think they're going to look at me, and then I might continue a little bit after. But I don't take a lot of frames on the street. So these images are sometimes called grabs, right? Because they capture a candid moment of life. With this image, I was coming back from the cleaners and I saw this woman across the street. We were the only people on the block. She was matching her house. I had to have a photograph of her, but it was going to be really awkward because I had to, it was really obvious I was going to come across the street. So as I approached, I just said, you look so beautiful, because it was true, and it was an awkward situation if I didn't say anything. And then I got this lovely smile in response, and it was what made the image work, in my opinion, and also puts a smile on my face. So these are images that I make regularly and post on Instagram. I make them, again, with my iPhone, so it's very iPhone, Instagram-centric series. I call it Street Dailies. There are almost like 3,000 images and counting so far, conceived on a camera phone, conceived to be looked at on a small screen. The compositions are pretty simple. They're really not a lot of elements in the frame. They're really about highlighting just like one person. And then with my Rolleiflex, the process is different. I roam the streets looking for people I want to photograph and introduce myself, ask them if they have a moment. And just one thing I'll say about this is if you are going to ask permission, like sort of get a script together before you go out there, something short and sweet. But I remember one day I was out photographing and I was having a lot of rejections, and one of my really good photographer friends, Amy Arbus, came over for dinner, and I was like, oh, she's like, well, what did you say? So I told her my spiel. Hi, I'm sorry to bother you. I've been making photographs of people in the neighborhood. I wonder if I could take your picture. Like that's sort of, she was like, you forgot to say you live here. Like you live in Bed-Stuy, right? So just like the smallest little things can be really helpful to include. I live here. Like think about what a different impact that would have on someone. I'm not just helicoptering in. And so I make 2 frames when I'm making collaborative images like that. For the first frame, I'll let them present however they want. I'll tell them to look into the lens, but I'll let them assemble in whatever way they want. And then for the second frame, I might give them some more direction. And the reason I do that is there's a couple reasons. First of all, I don't want them to feel rejected. So, well, first of all, oftentimes how they present to the camera for the first frame is like better than anything I could ever imagine. And this is a good example of that. I did not tell them to embrace like this. They were like, take our picture. I just had a really deep conversation with the woman, and it was a really lovely moment. And I couldn't have asked for a better, pose, and it was authentic to who they were. So I loved that. And then also I don't want anyone to feel rejected. And so after every first frame, no matter how it went, I always say, that was great. Now let's do blah, blah, blah. And then I take one more. And I just try to keep it short and sweet like that. Some of my mentors are like, you're nuts, you have to take more images. But it's just been my method, and it's just worked really well for me. I recognize that people, even if they're at the park hanging out with their friends, like they don't want to hang out with some lady who's working on her project, right? So I just want to be really respectful to that. And keep it short and sweet. And then, because I didn't grow up in Bed-Stuy, I felt like I needed to somehow gain the trust of the community members. So I walked the same path every time I went out. I walked at the same hour every day. I also wore the same clothes, just so I would be recognizable. Like, I know it's kind of weird, but it was kind of great, and so if I didn't have the courage one day to ask someone for their photo, I would at least try to get eye contact and be like, see you tomorrow, in my head. I'm gonna, one of these days, I'm gonna ask for a picture of you and you're gonna hopefully let me. So again, this is like what I was talking about earlier, like letting other people get to know you. You're out there, you wanna get to know everybody, you wanna take their picture. Well, you have to give something in return, or even not in return, to instigate that sort of situation. So these are Rolleiflex images that were made in my most recent book called Personal Ties, Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. These are from my adopted neighborhood. I've lived in Bed-Stuy since 2015. It was published by Schilt Publishing in the Netherlands, and Larry Fink, who sadly passed away recently, wrote the foreword, and then the afterword was written by a third-generation Bed-Stuy resident that I felt was really important to sort of land people in this neighborhood. I only have 53 pictures. Bed-Stuy is way more than 53 pictures. It's bigger than, it's first of all a very big neighborhood, but you know, I just needed someone, I wanted something that would like land viewers a little bit more. And C. Joy Sanchez was the writer, and she just wrote something extremely personal and wonderful, and super thankful for that. So all of the images that I've shown, mostly all were made in New York City, but I've also photographed in Vietnam and Italy, in Malaysia, Singapore, Mexico, Macau, France, Spain. This one was made in Tokyo, obviously. So I just think it's really great to get out of my comfort zone of New York City, my own country, my own language, because it requires a different strategy or methodology and allows me to work on my nonverbal skills. And like I was saying before, like sometimes I think I get there faster when we don't have language in common, oddly. And this one was made on the streets of Hawaii. That's where they hang out there. That's where I gotta retire to. And I'll just leave you with this, like the point is, you know, no matter where you are or what kind of personality you have or approach you take or camera you use, if you believe in what you're doing and you have good intentions, that's all that matters. You want to be who you are, you want to experiment until you find methods that work for you, and you want to learn from your interactions with people. So I promise not only we become a better photographer, but you'll become a more courageous, adaptable, engaged, and sensitive person. Thank you so much. Do we have time for questions, Seth? Do we have any questions? Anyone have any questions?
Just repeat them.
Okay, yeah. Yes.
What was it like getting the book published? Because I've heard of people trying to get their books published, but I haven't actually met somebody that actually had, I guess, like a photo book published. So can you flesh that out a little bit?
Sure, yeah. She asked what was it like to have a book published. It was an extremely heavy lift, to be honest. It's a long project. It takes a lot of work. When I was making that series, I wasn't necessarily thinking of making it into a book, but the publisher who offered to make it for me, Martin Schultz, he and I had met in 2012, so about 10 years later, he was still following me on Instagram and contacted me and was like, you know, if you could make a book, what would it be? I was sitting on all this Bed-Stuy work, my Rolleiflex work, I keep at home, meaning I don't really release my Rolleiflex work like I do my Instagram series, constantly releasing those. But so I was sitting on this body of work. It was 2020, and I knew that the world had changed. I felt like that series had come to an end, and so we sort of embarked on that partnership. But again, after 10 years of knowing him. And those are, I think, really ideal partnerships because he knew who I was. He knew the images I made. There was a lot of trust there. And what caused me to meet him was PhotoFest, which is a place where you can get your portfolio reviewed. And I really highly recommend portfolio reviews if you guys are looking to make connections with gallerists, with magazines, with curators, with fellow photographers. It's so nice that there's a lot to be gained from just like hanging out with other photographers. So, you know, it was a lot. And there were times when I wanted things and Martin Schultz didn't, and Martin Schultz wanted things and I didn't. And, you know, we just picked our battles, and it was really nice. I'm often alone in all this stuff, so it was really great to have a partner. It was great to have a graphic designer that helped me get through all these images that I couldn't see through myself. But I did have to do a Kickstarter. That's like a topic that's probably too long for today. But, you know, it's hard to ask people for money. But it was also really beautiful. As you guys know, I've never gotten married, and I felt like it was like the wedding I never had because everyone who, you know, all my friends were like so supportive, and it felt really great. And I wasn't ready for, not that I wasn't ready for that, I didn't expect that. And so there's like some really beautiful things that go on when, in that scenario, or at least did for me. Yes, in the back.
I guess it's kind of a follow-up, but also along with the gallery. So when you did the book, and I know, of course, we own the images, but when you did a book or did prints, did you have to talk to the folks that you photographed?
So the question is, did I have to get the permission of the people in the photographs when I made a book?
Yeah, especially if you're selling it.
Especially if you're selling it, yeah. So thankfully, there is a caveat where if you're selling your art, if it's art, then you don't need the permission of the people. So I actually don't often get model releases just because it makes that interaction that was like such this beautiful anonymous trust and then I say, can you sign this piece of paper that gives me every right to do whatever I want with your image? I just can't go there. So I'd rather, lose out on whatever money I would have if I had been able to sell it to someone else. But anyway, no. If you're selling your images in a gallery, if you're selling them in a book, I've had these images published in the New York Times. They knew I didn't have model releases. That's all okay. If you're selling them to Coca-Cola and there's someone recognizable in there, no, you need a model release, and Coca-Cola will make sure that you do. But you're often the one responsible financially and otherwise. So you really want to make sure that you do the right things there. Yes.
So, not your only book, lots of exhibits. How do you find projects and then sequence them in street work? Do you start with the idea? Do you find the idea after the fact? What does that process look like?
So the question is, after you've made the pictures, like, how do you make bodies of work, and how does that occur to you? Sometimes it occurs to me in the edit, because a lot of times the photographs will show you what you're seeing and you don't even know it. Like my mentor, Karen Marshall, always says, like, you're having a conversation with your photographs. Like, you start the conversation by making them, and then the photographs respond. And then you make more photos, and then those photos respond. And so there's a lot of give and take there. And I feel like one of the mystical sides of photographing is this very question of selecting and sequencing images, which I feel like is not nearly talked about as much as like actually making photographs. And I think that's a big mistake, because I think 50% of what we do as photographers is select images and sequence them, or at least that's what I think separates people who take pictures from people who are photographers, like who are putting the time in to looking at their images, to making a collection, to saying something greater beyond just like a single image. So sometimes it happens, it's pretty straightforward, and it's like what I want from the start. And then other times it evolves into something else, like the iPhone images, the Instagram images I made into a deck of cards after the fact. And each of the suits are different sets of people. So like the diamonds are New York City workers, the spades are New York City grannies or abuelitas or whatever you want to call them. The clubs were like people who hang out with their posse, like twins in sets. And the hearts were like quintessential extraordinary New Yorkers we all know and love and hope never go away, right? So those were series that I found after looking at over 2,000 of them, and having the epiphany, oh, I want to make a deck of cards. Oh, then I should make each suit a certain something. So that's the fun puzzle of it all, is like, what am I doing? Do I want to say something? What am I going to title it? And then sometimes we don't even need to go that far. It's not about that. Like many of you guys in here might not really even want to do that. You just want to go out and make connections with people. And that's a beautiful thing too. I mean, I was just saying to you before, I got here, that I'm just always trying to keep things really pure on the street. Like, I always want to make sure I'm photographing because I want to photograph, not because of what I think other people might want to see. And that's a really big thing for me, because photographing on the street is a source of happiness for me. So I'm always trying to protect it. I'm always trying to make sure that, I don't squash it somehow, So a little bit of sunlight, a little bit of water, things like that. Just paying attention to what I'm photographing and why. Yes?
First of all, wonderful, thank you for
Thank
the
you.
presentation. When you're calling and editing, let's say you decided, I'm going to do this deck of cards, are you doing that digitally, or are you printing out?
Printing out.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think some people are fine with, making their selections online. I found it much easier just to, I like thousands of pictures, and in the case of a deck of playing cards, I just made little mock cards, and so that's how I was sort of like, oh, well, we've got all the grandmas, and then we've got all the workers, because I love the workers and I love the grandmas, and so I really advocate for printing out. Same thing with the bed-stuy work. I just print them out on like regular paper from Staples. That's like, 20 cents per, it can be a work print. And then again, I use the blue tape. I put them up on the wall. Oh, this image. Oh, wow, it looks different when it's with this image. And it's super easy to move them around. And those sorts of relationships, you can't really see until the images are together. So it's really helpful and faster in my mind to get off the computer. I'm also on the computer a lot, so it's a great excuse to just like hold something that exists, Oh, yeah, do you want to follow up?
I just follow up also, do people ever ask to receive their images from you after the interaction?
Yes, the question is, do people ever ask to receive the images after I make them? They do, but not as much as I would think. Yeah, you in the green.
Yeah, so you mentioned that you have a mentor.
Yes,
So
quite
talk,
a few.
Talk about that process, gaining a mentor, maintaining a mentor, recognizing when your mentor isn't mentoring the way that you need them to be, and just that whole process.
Yeah, so the question is like, how do you get a mentor and how do you like manage that relationship? So I don't even know if the people I call mentors know that I call them mentors. I just perceive them as mentors. So Karen Marshall, who I referred to as a mentor earlier, was my second teacher at ICP in 2001, and she's just stayed in my life ever since. And we always talk about how it's going. You know, she's older than I am, so she has more practice photographing. But I would say like I definitely don't bear down on those relationships. You can learn a lot again from your fellow photographers. They don't have to be some like seasoned photographer to learn something. Mostly because people can say stuff about your images that you don't see. So you don't have to be, you know, all you need to be is not yourself for someone to say something really insightful about your images. So, you know, I take mentorship from wherever it appears. Yes, you in the back, sorry. Yes.
Just out of curiosity, you had talked about the portfolio review. Would I be allowed to ask, I guess, what would be some good recommendations for that? For like somebody like myself who wants to get, I guess, my images seen by?
Yeah, I mean, just, so the question is, what kind of portfolio reviews are out there and how do you find them? Yeah, you're welcome. I would like look up online because some of them are vetted, some of them you have to apply to, others you can just buy, you know, you can just pay your admission. And basically, for those of you who don't know, portfolio reviews, you sit down with other people in the industry. They're hoping to meet you, you know, or meet photographers that are sort of vibe with them. So it's a really great way of establishing relationships. I always talk about it as like planting a seed. You know, it's like not necessarily that you're going to meet with a gallerist and then walk out of there with representation, but I met with Brian Clamp, who represents me at Clamp Art, and you know, it was a year and a half after I met him at a portfolio review that we started to work together. I have a gallery in Paris, and I met her 3 years later. We started working together. I talked to you about, you know, the book publisher Martin Schilt, 10 years after meeting him at the portfolio review. So anyway, you have like 20 minutes where you talk together, you show your portfolio, you get your spiel together. It's really great because you sort of get your elevator speech ready so you can talk about what your art does and, you know, what it means to you and all that stuff. And that's really good for you to start hashing out because it can be a real mystery for a while. But yeah, look online and because there's a lot. Yes, you and the, yes.
I'm just wondering, what's your rhythm like when you're taking candid shots? Like, for example, this photo, do you wait for a shot? Is it something, I know sometimes it's spontaneous, like the shot in the taxi cab, or in the car.
Yeah.
That was spontaneous, but when you're walking on the street, how does that go?
So the question is, when you're making candid pictures, do you wait for them, or like how do you manage that situation? So in this image, my boyfriend's a musician, and he was playing in a band in a block party, so I was just there. I mean, one of the reasons that I love this stupid little iPhone is because I always have it on me, and it has created this wonderful habit of always looking for images, which I saw before, but like I don't always have my nice camera on me. And yes, I can bring my nice camera around with me if I wanted to, but it's not always practical. And I've really enjoyed using the iPhone for these sorts of candid takes. So I definitely don't wait for them. Not with the iPhone. With the Rolleiflex, it's so much more different. But like, I mean, Cartier-Bresson is pretty famous for like waiting at a certain corner because he feels like there's just something delicious there waiting for him. I don't have the patience for that. I've tried it, and I'm like, within 30 seconds, I want to leave. So I just like leave, yeah. So I prefer to just like encounter them and just always be ready. I do pretty much walk around with my phone open, you know, and like just one swipe. I don't put a case on my camera so that I can use it with my smallish hands, again, with just like one swipe. So I just try to be always ready is the answer. And then behind you, yes, hi.
So, firstly, I love your work and really nice presentation.
Thank you.
And something I find really impressive and intriguing about your portraits is how so many people have deep emotions. They are so evocative, and they are not just smiling. Like when I ask people for permission for photos, the first thing they do, if they are amenable, is smile, right? And that's the photo I get, and it's just it's superficial. It's not what attracted me to them. So how, I know you told me about your 2 frames, but how are you capturing so many photos where people are not just smiling at you?
Well, when it comes to candid photography, I edit for moments where people aren't smiling, and because I'm not asking permission, I don't have the. I didn't repeat her question. So her question is, how do you basically take pictures of people when if they're not smiling, like when their guard is down or when they have like an expression where you can kind of get in there more? And my answer is, I just edit for those moments. So I do, although I want someone to look my way, I'm very quick. I don't try to get in their face. If there's an image where someone is smiling and it's a candid photograph, like it's rare, but like you've seen some of the few where I have, and I'm fine with those. I agree, like when if we ask someone for a picture, like why wouldn't they smile? That's a totally normal thing to do, right? As street photographers, we're like, right? But what else are they gonna do? So it's up to you as a photographer to direct that situation from there out, right? So what I like to do is take the picture of the smiling person, if it's a collaborative portrait, posed portrait, and then say, okay, like, let's try something different. You know, just like because they don't know what to do. Like you have to tell them. And you can't say, I want to look deeply into your eyes. I want you to give me something evocative, like really give it to me. You know, this is like a person who's not a model, right? They're just like, what? So you just have to use words that, that sort of get them there. And like I was saying in my presentation, like emanating the kind of response that you want from them. Like for me, it's calm, comfortable, and genuine. So just being like someone who's not, I don't know, flustered or, you know, just like trying to bring to it like a sense of ease, like people will often just like mimic that. And then, you know, you just use your words. Like, you know, maybe say something like have a neutral expression. You know, I want you to feel yourself, but just like look into the lens, it's gonna be really quick, and then snap, you know. But when you're taking pictures without asking permission, it's a wild, wild world, you know. You just get what you get, and hopefully you get pictures of, you know, sometimes I'm taking pictures of people who are waiting for the bus, so they do look like this, you know, they don't look, you know. So you look for those moments too, where you can like find those people. Yeah, yes.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about taking candid pictures on the street with kids. You know, it can be very, I think, difficult because parents get understandably freaked out, I guess, sometimes. So do you do it? And if you do, how do you approach it?
Yeah, I do it, and I do it a lot. I love children. I mean, I don't have any of my own, thank you. And I think they're like puppies, you know. They're really fun to have around. Like there's so much joy. And
I think some of the best pictures that I've taken of it.
Right, they're so animated, yeah, and a lot of them enjoy being photographed, and that can be really fun. I did consult a lawyer on this. It's totally legal to photograph children. So again, this isn't gonna pacify some parent who has an issue. If the parents are around, you know, maybe you give them a nod. I usually don't. And then if they have some problem, I just deal with it after. Yeah, so I just go for it. That's my answer. Did I reiterate that question? The question was about photographing kids and is it okay and how do you do it? And I gave you the answer of,
We should probably wrap the stream and take questions after. So.
okay. So we're wrapping up.
Yeah, there's just a stream.
Okay.
All right, thanks.